Alvin Rabushka is often known as the father of the flat tax, and his work, the Hall-Rabushka Flat Tax plan, led directly or indirectly to the adoption of the flat tax in many of the former communist countries of Central and Eastern Europe, and in turn that helped create a dramatic economic transformation, an increase in the level of tax revenues, and a sustainable, fair and non-discriminatory tax system. Dr. Rabushka, you're often known as the father of the flat tax. Could you tell us what a flat tax is?
A flat tax is a single rate applied to all sources of income, from the $10,000 to the $100,000 to the million. Every flat tax system also includes a very large personal allowance or deduction, which means up to a certain amount, say the first $15,000 or $20,000, there's no tax. From that point on, every dollar is taxed exactly the same.
You often describe the flat tax system as a fair tax system. What do you think it is that makes it fair?
It taxes all people equally, regardless of race, sex, gender, taste, whatever. We've done away with all of the laws that discriminate against people in all walks of life, and yet our tax systems discriminate against everyone. So having a flat tax brings the rule of law, equal treatment under the law, to all people. It is progressive tax. As I've indicated, you exempt the first $10,000, $20,000 or pounds worth of income, and you start taxing from that point. So the first $20,000 may be zero. The next $20,000 at, say, 20% would give you an average of 10%. So it is progressive as you rise up through the ranks in salary. But the main thing, it's treating people equally. Go back to the Bible. The tithe was 10% for everybody. It didn't talk about graduated rates. So I think in this regard, the notion that you have to keep taxing the rich higher and higher and higher is patently unfair.
Now, what are the political benefits of a flat tax in terms of it creating the right dynamics that can help ensure that government spending is constrained?
The virtue of that is that people will resist raising taxes to finance more spending because everybody has to pay equally. Politicians today tend to say, oh, we're only going to raise the tax on the top 1% or 2% or 5%. So we divide the people into the rich and the not so rich. The nice thing about a flat tax is if you want to spend more and you need more tax, everyone has to pay in proportion to their income the same exact rate. I think that helps slowing down this run up in taxes. But I also would add, one has to be very careful not to always think in terms of raising tax to spend more. I think we need to think about controlling spending and maybe even slowing it down so we can bring a lower rate of tax, which I would argue maintains and produces a more healthy economic environment, more growth, more jobs, and better pay.
Can you describe to what extent flat taxes have been adopted throughout the world in recent years?
Well, since the end of the Soviet Union in 1991, we've added about 35 countries which now have a flat tax. There were about 4 or 5 before then which had a flat tax. It all started in Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania in 1994, 5, and 6. Then Russia in 2000. And then between 2000 and 2010, there were about another 30 countries all over the world, from Central Europe, some in Africa, some in Latin America, some offshore Africa. And the rates run as low as 9% in Macedonia to as high as 25% in some countries. But the average is usually between about 15 and 20%. So all of these are relatively low tax, simple tax jurisdictions.
How can we measure the success of a flat tax system? And what have the benefits been when they've been implemented?
Most obvious benefits are, one, the reduction in the underground black market economy. People were going underground without incorporation, without insurance, without banking, because the tax rates were so confiscatory. Once they dropped the tax rates down to 13, 15, 18%, people came out into the open, formed companies, got banking, got insurance, and it turns out that revenue grew so rapidly from both the rise in underground to honest economies and the reduction in the tax rate, which is an incentive, that revenues grew much faster than expected, and deficit budgets in some cases turned into surpluses. If you look at Central and Eastern Europe, the countries that adopted the flat tax grew faster than those that did not. So It's been a great success almost everywhere it's been tried.
In the UK, we've got a tax system which is full of anomalies. Depending on how you define it, we've got marginal rates at 0%, 12%, 32%, 42%, 62%, 42% again, and then 47%. Given that starting point, how do you move from there to implement a flat tax? Do you do it all in one go, or should you do it gradually?
The approach that I've come to take is to provide an option. You draft a law which replaces the current personal corporate income tax system with a single flat tax on individual and business income. But you give people 5 years to make the transition. So there may be some firms or individuals who would find it more attractive to continue to file their taxes under the old system. At the end of 5 years, you would be required to move to the new system. We've estimated in the United States that about 70 to 80% of all individuals and businesses would choose the flat tax in year 1, and by year 3 or 4, it would be up in the mid to upper 90s. So it gives people a chance who are a little worried, a little nervous, a little concerned to choose to stick with the old system if they find it's to their benefit. But we've estimated, based on talking with business people, that most of them will move to the flat tax right away.